All right, so this week in crypto, it kind of felt like strapping into a roller coaster blindfolded. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's been crazy. You've all been sending over some seriously thought-provoking articles, and we're gonna untangle this whole mess together. Billion-dollar hacks, Bitcoin ETFs, they're like popping up in the most unexpected places. Enough price predictions to make your head spin.
Uh-huh.
So we're going deep on all of that and what it really means for you today.
This week was really interesting because it embodies the two sides of crypto so perfectly. You have this exhilarating potential, but it's all tangled up with some really serious risks. And I think that tension is what keeps us all so hooked.
Yeah, it's just kind of addicting, isn't it? Well, let's start with I guess you could say a gut punch. Bybit losing $1.46 billion in ETH. I mean, does it get any bigger than that? I'm still trying to process like the sheer scale of this hack.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely a wake-up call. And frankly, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. This wasn't some small-time exploit. They hit Bybit's cold wallet,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be like the Fort Knox of crypto storage. So suddenly all those claims about unhackable, they don't sound quite so ironclad anymore.
Yeah, that's what worries me. I mean, I always thought cold wallets were basically bulletproof. What does this mean for the average investor? Like me, just trying to keep their cryptos safe.
Well, I think it means we need to look beyond the marketing hype. We have to get into like the nitty-gritty of security.
Mhm.
In Bybit's case, the early analysis is pointing to a potential compromise of their multi-signature scheme, maybe even an inside job. And you know what? It's just a reminder that no system is foolproof. And relying on just one security layer, it's like locking your front door, leaving all the windows wide open.
Okay, so maybe we shouldn't be putting all our faith in exchanges, even the big ones. But then, on the flip side, we have Costa Rica going all in on a Bitcoin ETF. I gotta say, now that feels like a major leap forward for mainstream adoption.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just some fringe experiment anymore. Costa Rica really carefully considered this move. They navigated a tricky regulatory landscape to make it happen. And you know what? Other countries are watching. If this ETF proves successful, it could trigger a domino effect, and it would bring crypto investments right to the fingertips of everyday people through their regular brokerage accounts.
So are we talking like a global ETF wave? Is that what you're predicting?
It's definitely a possibility.
Ah.
And it's not just coming from smaller nations either. Look at Franklin Templeton, a massive asset management firm. They just filed for their own crypto product this week. We're talking big leagues now, and they're betting big on crypto's future.
That's huge, but I'm also thinking about that Picoin fiasco, 71% crash right out of the gate. How do we reconcile these two realities, these institutional giants diving in while everyday investors are getting burned on these, like...
Hyped up coins. I think it's a classic case of caveat emptor, buyer beware. The Picoin story really highlights the dark side of all this hype. People saw the headlines, they heard all the promises of quick riches, and they jumped in head first, without understanding the technology or the risks. It's a harsh lesson, but it's a necessary one.
So while the big players are making calculated moves, everyday investors need to be even more cautious. It feels like a minefield out there.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. The key is to shift your mindset. Instead of chasing the next moonshot, focus on understanding the underlying value. What problem does this project solve? Who's behind it? What's their track record? These are the questions that separate the wheat from the chaff.
Okay, so due diligence is more important than ever. But let's be honest, it's tough to stay level-headed when you've got analysts like Investing Haven screaming about Bitcoin hitting $170,000 this year. Ethereum, Solana, all going to the moon. I mean, how do we sift through all this noise?
That's where critical thinking comes in. It's easy to get swept up in the hype,
Yeah.
especially when you see those eye-popping numbers. But remember, those are just predictions, not guarantees. And on the flip side, you've got warnings about Solana potentially taking a nosedive below $180. It's a wild ride,
Yeah.
and it pays to be skeptical.
Speaking of wild rides, can we talk about the SEC dropping its case against Coinbase? That was a total twat twist. What happened there? And what does it mean for the average crypto enthusiast in the U.S.?
It's a fascinating turn of events. And I think it suggests that the SEC might be softening its stance on crypto. Remember, this case was seen as a major test of the U.S. regulatory approach. And the fact that they dropped it could signal a more open and collaborative approach moving forward.
So instead of cracking down, they're starting to play ball. Could this be the breakthrough the industry has been waiting for?
It's in. It's too early to declare victory. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. If the U.S. can create a regulatory framework that balances innovation with investor protection, it could become a global leader in the crypto space.
Okay, so we've got bullish predictions, cautious warnings, a major exchange getting hacked, and the SEC playing hot potato with regulation. It's a lot to digest, even for someone who follows this stuff closely.
Yes, but it's this very complexity. That makes crypto so fascinating, don't you think? It's not a passive investment. It demands your attention, your critical thinking,
Hmm.
your willingness to learn and adapt, and ultimately, that's what makes it so rewarding.
You're right, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But before we get too deep into the philosophical side of things, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss. ZebPay's latest list of the top 10 crypto assets. Feels like a good compass, you know,
Oh,
for navigating this ever-changing landscape.
absolutely. This list gives us a snapshot of what's hot right now. But more importantly, it reveals some underlying trends that can help us make smarter decisions. Let's break it down and see what insights we can glean for our listeners. Looking at ZebPay's list, it's clear that DeFi is still a major force. 3 out of the top 10 projects are DeFi protocols, which tells you something about where the smart money is going.
Okay, so DeFi is hot, but I gotta admit, it still feels a bit like the Wild West to me, you know?
Yeah.
Lots of potential, but also a lot of risk. What's your take on the DeFi landscape right now?
Well, DeFi is definitely still in its early stages, but the innovation happening there is mind-blowing. We're talking about lending, borrowing, trading, all happening without those traditional intermediaries. It's a radical shift in how we think about finance.
But then we hear these stories about these DeFi protocols getting hacked, people losing their savings. It's hard to know who to trust.
That's a valid concern. Security is paramount in DeFi, and unfortunately there have been some high-profile exploits. But it's important to remember that these incidents often stem from human error or code vulnerabilities, not inherent flaws in the technology itself.
So it's a matter of choosing the right projects, doing your research,
Yeah.
and understanding the risks involved.
Exactly. Don't just jump into the latest hyped-up yield farming scheme. Look for projects with audited code, transparent teams, and a proven track record. And remember, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right. That makes sense. But let's zoom out for a second. We've got DeFi, we've got NFTs, we've got the metaverse. It feels like the crypto space is expanding in every direction. How do we even begin to wrap our heads around all of this?
Wow. It can be overwhelming, but that's also part of the excitement. Crypto is a constantly evolving ecosystem, and there's always something new to discover. The key is to find what resonates with you, what aligns with your interests and your values.
It's not just about making money, it's about finding your niche within this broader movement.
Precisely. Crypto is more than just an investment. It's a community, a culture, a way of thinking. And within this space, there are countless opportunities to contribute, to create,
Yeah.
to build something meaningful.
Okay, I'm starting to get that feeling again, like we're on the cusp of something truly revolutionary. But I also know that many of our listeners are still on the sidelines, maybe feeling intimidated or unsure where to even start.
That's completely understandable. Crypto can seem like a daunting world, especially with all the technical jargon and rapid-fire developments. But it doesn't have to be that way. There are incredible resources available to help you learn at your own pace, whether it's online courses, podcasts like this one, or simply connecting with others in the community.
So you're saying that taking that first step, even if it's just dipping your toes in, is more important than trying to become an expert overnight.
Absolutely. The crypto journey is a marathon, not a sprint. Start small. Learn as you go. And don't be afraid to ask questions. There's a whole community out there willing to help and guide you.
That's reassuring to hear. But let's go back to ZebPay's list for a moment. It's interesting to see how diverse it is, with projects ranging from established players like Bitcoin and Ethereum to newer, more experimental ventures. What does that tell us about the state of the market right now?
Well, I think it reflects the dynamism of the crypto space. We're seeing a blending of the old and the new, the proven and the experimental. And that's what makes it so exciting. There's room for both established giants and disruptive newcomers to thrive.
But doesn't that also make it more difficult for the average investor? To pick winners and losers, it feels like the landscape is shifting under our feet constantly.
It's true that the market is constantly in flux, but that doesn't mean it's impossible to navigate. The key is to focus on the fundamentals. Look for projects with strong teams, real-world use cases, and active communities.
So it's not just about chasing the next big pump. It's about finding projects that are building something sustainable, something with long-term value.
Exactly. The pump and dump schemes will come and go,
Hmm.
but the projects that are truly solving problems and creating value are the ones who will endure.
Okay, so we're looking for projects with strong fundamentals, real-world applications, and a bit of staying power. But with all these different sectors emerging, DeFi, NFTs, Web3, How do we even know where to begin our research?
It can be overwhelming. But the good news is that you don't have to be an expert in everything. Start by exploring the areas that pique your interest. Do you have a passion for art? Dive into the NFT space. Are you fascinated by decentralized finance? Explore the DeFi protocols on ZebPay's list.
So you're saying it's about following your curiosity, finding the areas that spark your imagination, and then going from there.
Exactly. The crypto world is vast and multifaceted. There's something for everyone. And the best way to find your place is to follow your passions and explore with an open mind.
Okay. I'm starting to feel a bit more adventurous. But I also know that with all this potential comes a lot of responsibility. We've talked about the need for due diligence, for risk management, for understanding the technology. It's not something to be taken lightly.
You're absolutely right. Crypto is a powerful tool, but it needs to be wielded responsibly. We need to be mindful of the potential risks, both to ourselves and to the wider ecosystem.
And that brings us back to the bigger picture, doesn't it? We've talked about the hacks, the volatility, the regulatory uncertainty. But amidst all the chaos, there's this undeniable sense of possibility, of building a better future.
That's the heart of the crypto movement, isn't it? It's about challenging the status quo, about empowering individuals, about creating a more equitable and transparent financial system.
It's about more than just making money. It's about shaping the future of finance, of technology, of society itself. And that's a conversation I'm excited to continue exploring. In the final part of our deep dive, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground: hacks, ETFs, DeFi deep dives, even the SEC doing a complete 180. But now I'm curious, what does all of this mean for the future? Where is this crypto roller coaster taking us next?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? No one has a crystal ball. But I think if we connect the dots, we can start to see some fascinating possibilities emerge. Imagine a world where, you're paying for your morning coffee with Bitcoin, your digital identity is secured on the blockchain, you're earning interest on your crypto holdings, and like a decentralized savings account.
Okay, now that's a future I can get behind, but realistically, how far away are we from that vision? I mean, is this something our listeners might actually experience in their lifetime, or are we talking sci-fi territory here?
Well, I think parts of that vision are already happening. We're seeing crypto payments gaining traction, NFTs disrupting the art and music industries, and DeFi offering these really cool alternatives to traditional financial services. The technology is evolving so rapidly, and adoption is accelerating. It's not a matter of if anymore, it's when.
Okay, so the future is closer than we think. But there's still this sense of uncertainty, right? I mean, with regulations constantly shifting and these occasional massive hacks shaking confidence. How can the average person feel secure enough to truly embrace this new world?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Building trust and stability. In a system that was designed to disrupt the status quo, I think education is key. The more people understand how crypto works, the more comfortable they'll feel using it. And as adoption grows, regulators will have no choice but to provide clear guidelines and safeguards.
So it's a two-way street. Individuals taking responsibility for their own education, and governments catching up to create a more secure and transparent environment. But let's get personal for a moment. What role do you think our listeners, those following along on this wild crypto ride, should play in all of this?
Well, I think it's about finding your place, in this evolving ecosystem. Maybe you become an active investor, carefully researching and supporting projects you believe in. Maybe you dive into the technical side, learning to code or develop decentralized applications. Or maybe you simply become an informed advocate, helping to educate others and demystify this often misunderstood technology.
Yeah, I love that. It's not just about buying and holding, it's about actively shaping the future of crypto. But with so many different paths to choose from, how can our listeners even begin to navigate this complex landscape? Where do they even start?
The first step is simple. Stay curious. Don't be afraid to explore, to ask questions, to challenge your assumptions. Dive into the resources we've mentioned. ZebPay's top 10 list, reputable news sources, educational platforms, connect with others in the community, attend online events, follow thought leaders on social media. The more you engage, the more clarity you'll gain.
So it's about taking ownership of your crypto journey. Don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. Go out there and discover it for yourself. But I have to ask, with all the risks we've discussed, the volatility, the scams, the ever-looming threat of another Bybit-style hack, is it really worth it? What would you say to someone on the fence, hesitant to dive in?
I'd say this. Crypto is not for the faint of heart. It's a roller coaster, exhilarating highs and gut-wrenching lows. But it's also a movement, a revolution, a chance to be part of something truly transformative. If you're willing to embrace the uncertainty, Do your homework and to approach it with a critical but open mind. The potential rewards are immense.
Wow, those are some inspiring words to end on. So, for our listeners feeling that spark of curiosity, that pull towards this exciting, sometimes terrifying world of crypto, what's like the one piece of advice you want them to walk away with?
Don't let fear hold you back. Embrace the learning curve, connect with others, and most importantly, remember this: the future of crypto is not something that's happening to you. It's something you have the power to shape.
Beautifully said. I think that's the perfect note to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a wild ride, but we wouldn't have it any other way. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. The future of crypto awaits.